Hello everybody, welcome back. So this week we're making a reproduction of an 18th century candle holder. So I don't have copyright clearance to show images of the original one, but I believe that it was in Seymour Lindsay's book Iron and Brass Implements of the English Home. It's not a particularly attractive piece, but it does take a bit of skill. So I've done a rough drawing of the silhouette of it, and I'm using a piece of wire to figure out the length of material that I need. So each leg will be about 5¼ inches, I believe. So I'm going to start with some 12mm round, and I am actually going to change the section of it to square. So the reason I forged down from bigger stock is because the material would have been mostly handmade back in the 18th century. It wasn't being rolled yet. So the best way to get material with the right appearance is to actually make it yourself like it would have been. So marking everything up and making the 3 legs from a single piece, so marking up where each leg will be on the piece. I mark up from left to right, 1.5 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, 4 inches. And the piece will be folded where the 2 4-inch points meet and where the 2 1.5-inch points meet. So the leg sections are all twisted. So heat up the appropriate bit. And you can see that the twist is going a bit faster at the top, so I just cool off the top rather, and take the bit that twisted a little slower and just make it catch up. Once you've got all the twists in, get a nice long heat on the piece and give it a bit of a straighten. Now, I should use a hide mallet, it'll be a bit easier and nicer. My hide mallet died, I've only got a rubber mallet, so I'm just going to use that to straighten it. And I'm using a block of wood on the underside in order to save damaging the twists. So there we go. So this 3-inch section in the middle is where I will do a split to make it easier to fold. And run down, and there's a short section at the bottom. Turn the bar 90 degrees and cut halfway through that as well with the chisel. So as you can see, top and rotate 90 degrees, and another chisel split. So as you can see, this is going to make all 3 of the untwisted sections meet up. You've got 2 side by side and the 3rd one in the middle. And this is the part which is going to be the candle holder. You can probably hear the birds singing outside, I do apologise for that. So the next thing is to rake up your fire nice and high. Now we've covered this in quite a few videos. You basically want a high neutral layer in the fire so that you can get above a welding heat without actually burning your material. If you haven't heard me say it yet, check out the scarf welding video I did. I explained it in a bit more detail. But basically fluxless welding, like I do, takes good fire control. So we'll start by heating up the back end of the piece, turn it over and then heat up the part of the piece that you want to actually weld. And that just saves the welding heat getting sucked out of the back of the material. So when you're up to temperature, give it a weld. First heat just to tack it all together. Second heat to actually weld. I think the fire needs to clean out by the looks of it, because it's I think I've got a slightly high oxidizing layer in there, so should really have stopped to give it a clean, but there we go. The third heat to blend in. So I've gone out of the welding heat here, I'm just using it to clean up the material. And there we go, that's all welded together. So at this stage we're going to split off the join at the bottom so that all three legs are independent of one another. Doing it over the bick makes it easier to do without actually damaging the twists. Not that it matters if those bottom twists get damaged anyway, because they're going to be fire welded later on. So at this stage we're going to start spreading the socket, and I'm doing that at this stage because it'll be easier than when the candlestick is fully formed. So I'm starting off with a cross peen to spread it, and then moving on to a ball peen to get a more even, smoother and rounded shape. Off camera this has been quite well scrubbed because sockets are quite good at retaining scale and getting marked up. So make sure you quench the tip between heats as well, because that thin area will burn off quite easily. You can see that even though I've kept on top of quenching, I've still managed to burn the end of this socket a little bit. So go onto your cutting plate, and you only really want heat at the throat of the socket, because that's the bit you need to bend the most. Work the throat of the socket and that will drag the rest of the socket with it. So all you need to do is make sure that the two sides of the socket overlap, and then just work at the bottom, and it'll just take itself to a round shape quite naturally. Not using a mandrel, if you're careful you don't need one. This is how I do arrowheads as well. So if you're not quite round at the end of the socket, at the mouth of the socket, you can just round that up over the bick. Takes 5 seconds. There you go, socket's formed. So I'll now be using socket tongs to hold it. So at this stage we're going to spread the legs open a little bit, and I'm keeping the leg up against the side of the vise, and that saves it going off in a different direction. Don't know if you can hear the sheep outside as well. Also sorry about that. That one there. It's a spring. Everything's amorous. So head over to the bick. Start with the rubber mallet to save damaging the twists. Start shaping the legs. So you saw I brushed it one way and then I flattened it out from the other side. That just gives me that nice S-curve. So heating it up now with two of the legs bent can be a bit tricky, so I'll literally just have one of the legs in the fire. The toes will heat up quicker, so quench them off and carry on. So that's all three legs bent. So the next thing is to make the lower twists. So I got a piece of 8mm round, which is 8.5 inches long, and I forged that out to 12 3/4 inches. Twisting the vise. Just twisting it with a pair of tongs and not bothering with a spanner. The material's thin enough that it doesn't really matter. So I give it a bit of a straighten, lightly. So the next thing to do is to prepare the toes to be welded. So I will forge a chisel taper on there. And do the same thing to both ends of the thin bar. And weld them. Simple as that. So one to attack, one to weld, and a third heat to blend in. I went at this quite delicately, because I don't want to deform the toes too much. I got the back camera in a bad position there, but basically I formed a curve in order to make the lower bar fit in. Then popped a little chisel cut in to make it bend over the next toe. And then use a chisel cut to just bend over. I didn't really do a very good job of this. I could have done with that first curve being a lot smaller because it took up a bit more material than was destined to it. Which meant that my final curve was a bit smaller than I would have liked. That's a lesson learnt. Ideally I'd have made a practice piece before shooting the video, but it takes long enough to make the videos without doing a practice piece beforehand, so this is a voyage of discovery we're taking together. You can view my mistakes in all their glory. So weld it up. And that is all three welded. So just tweak all the bits together. I think this is the world's ugliest candle holder, but it is quite similar to the original, so it's not entirely my fault. I'll give a bit of a clean up with a wire brush. Twists are difficult to clean up with a wire brush like this because the brush doesn't like to go in the grooves. And the last thing I do is just clean up the socket for the candle. which is purely making it mostly level and then taking off the sharp edge. There we go. One ugly candle holder based on an 18th century original. You can see how much bigger that first curve is to the others. There we go. Very annoying. Can't do anything about it at this stage. Ideally I'd have spent a bit longer blending in the weld at the top as well. There we go. So, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please consider donating to Patreon. Here's a list of this week's Patreon donors. Thanks a lot, guys. And like I say, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.